17-year-old Lily Brooks had perfected the art of invisibility. At barely 5 feet 2 inches tall with a slight frame, shoulder-length dark hair that she kept pulled back in a simple ponytail, and clothes deliberately chosen from thrift stores to avoid attention, she moved through the hallways of Roosevelt High School like a ghost. Her family had moved to this small Ohio town 3 months ago when her mother got a job at the local library, and Lily had made it her mission to blend into the background until graduation. What her new classmates didn't know was that Lily had spent the last 8 years training in martial arts with her grandfather, a retired Marine who lived with them after her father's sudden death. She had learned discipline, control, and techniques that could drop someone twice her size in seconds. Her grandfather had taught her that true strength came from restraint, not from seeking conflict. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. When her family moved to Ohio, her mother had begged her to leave that life behind and just focus on being a normal teenager. "Please, sweetheart," her mother had said with exhaustion in her voice. "We've been through enough. I just want you to have a peaceful life here. Can you try to be just a regular girl for once?" Lily had agreed, partly because she was tired of being known only as the girl who could fight, and partly because she genuinely wanted to experience what normal teenage life felt like. She packed away her training gear, stopped talking about martial arts, and committed to keeping her skills completely hidden. The problem was that Roosevelt High School had its own ecosystem of predators and prey, and Lily had unknowingly painted a target on her back with her quiet demeanor. She sat alone at lunch, reading books with worn covers, her art supplies scattered across the table as she sketched in the margins of her notebook. She kept her head down in the hallways, avoiding eye contact with anyone who might mistake her. Glance for a challenge or an invitation. In art class, the only place she felt truly at peace, Mrs. Evans would occasionally stop by her easel and nod approvingly at her work. "You have real talent, Lily," she'd say quietly. "Don't be afraid to let it show." But Lily was afraid. She was afraid of standing out, afraid of being noticed, afraid of the chain reaction that might follow. She'd seen what happened to kids who didn't fit in, and she'd made a calculated decision to remain invisible rather than risk becoming a target. What she didn't realize was that sometimes, trying so hard to be invisible only made you more visible to the wrong people. The problem started during her 4th week at Roosevelt High. The school was typical small-town America: red brick buildings, green lawns, and that peculiar mix of cliques that seemed to exist everywhere. Lily quickly identified the social hierarchy: the popular kids who ruled the cafeteria, the athletes who owned the gym, the smart kids who dominated the library, and everyone else who just tried to survive. Unfortunately, she also identified the predators. Hunter Reed was the kind of guy who peaked in high school and was desperately trying to hold on to that peak for as long as possible. At 18, he was a senior who should have graduated the year before, but had been held back due to poor grades. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of cocky swagger that came from never being truly challenged. His 2 constant companions were Jackson Lee, a wiry kid with nervous energy who laughed too loudly at Hunter's jokes, and Megan White, a girl who seemed to exist solely to validate Hunter's sense of superiority. Their first interaction happened on a Tuesday during lunch. Lily was sitting alone at a corner table, quietly eating a sandwich and reading a book when Hunter's shadow fell across her table. Well, what do we have here?" Hunter said, sliding into the seat across from her without invitation. Jackson and Megan flanked him like bodyguards. "You're that new girl, right? The one from California?" Lily looked up from her book, immediately recognizing the predatory gleam in Hunter's eyes. She'd seen it countless times before, the look of someone who had identified what they thought was easy prey. "I'm Lily," she said quietly, closing her book. "And yes, I'm from Los Angeles." "Los Angeles? Jackson repeated in a mocking tone. Ooh, fancy. Bet you think you're better than us small-town folks, huh? I don't think that at all, Lily replied, her voice steady. I'm just trying to eat my lunch. Hunter leaned forward, his smile turning predatory. You know, new girl, there's kind of an unwritten rule here at Roosevelt. New students need to show a little respect to those of us who've been here longer. It's just how things work. Lily felt the familiar tightness in her chest that always preceded a fight. Every instinct her grandfather had drilled into her was screaming at her to establish dominance immediately, to show these kids that she wasn't someone to be trifled with. But she had made a promise to her mother, and more importantly, she genuinely wanted to try a different approach. I'm not looking for any trouble, she said, starting to pack up her lunch. I'll just eat somewhere else. Oh, but we haven't finished our conversation yet, Megan said, placing her hand on Lily's shoulder as she tried to stand. See, that respect I mentioned, it's not just about attitude. There's a small, let's call it a friendship fee. $10 a week, and we make sure nobody gives you any problems. The request was so absurd that Lily almost laughed. These kids had no idea who they were trying to intimidate. She could have had all three of them on the ground and unconscious in under 30 seconds. Instead, she gently removed Megan's hand from her shoulder and stood up. I need to think about it, she said, which was code for absolutely not, but said in a way that might buy her some time. Sure, Hunter said, his grin widening. Take your time. But don't take too much time. We'll talk again tomorrow. What followed was a campaign of systematic harassment that would have broken most people. Hunter and his friends seemed to take Lily's quiet refusal as a personal challenge, and they made it their mission to make her life at Roosevelt High as miserable as possible. It started small. They would accidentally bump into her in the hallways, hard enough to send her books flying. They would sit behind her in classes and whisper insults just loud enough for her to hear, but not loud enough for the teachers to notice. They would knock her backpack off her shoulder as they walked past, spilling her belongings across the floor. In the cafeteria, they escalated their tactics. Jackson would walk past her table and accidentally knock over her drink, soaking her lunch and forcing her to go hungry. Megan would make loud comments about Lily's thrift store clothes, her quiet nature, her lack of friends. Hunter would orchestrate elaborate pranks, putting gum in her hair, taping "kick me" signs to her back, spreading rumors about her family's financial situation. Through it all, Lily endured. She told herself it was temporary, that high school wouldn't last forever, that she could handle this without resorting to violence. She threw herself into her art, spending hours in the art room after school, creating paintings that expressed the frustration and anger she couldn't voice aloud. Mrs. Evans noticed the change in her work. Your recent pieces have so much emotion, she said one afternoon, studying a painting Lily had done of a storm-tossed ocean. There's real power here, Lily. Are you okay? Lily nodded, not trusting her voice. She wasn't okay, but she was determined to handle this her way. At home, she would practice her grandfather's exercises in secret, running through forms and techniques in her bedroom, muscle memory keeping her skills sharp even as she refused to use them. Sometimes she would catch herself planning exactly how she would take down each of her tormentors, mapping out the precise pressure points and joint locks that would end their harassment permanently. But every time she started to give in to those dark thoughts, she would hear her grandfather's voice in her head. Control, little warrior. Anyone can throw a punch. True strength is knowing when not to. The breaking point came during her 7th week at Roosevelt High. It was a Thursday morning during second period English class when Hunter decided to escalate beyond psychological warfare. Mrs. Patterson was discussing symbolism in To Kill a Mockingbird when Hunter raised his hand. Mrs. Patterson, I think Lily has something stuck to her shirt, he said with fake concern. All eyes turned to Lily, who looked down at her plain white t-shirt in confusion. She didn't see anything unusual, but before she could respond, Hunter was out of his seat and approaching her desk. "Here, let me help you with that," he said, reaching for her shirt. What happened next occurred in slow motion. Hunter grabbed the front of Lily's shirt and pulled, ostensibly to remove some imaginary debris, but his grip was too strong, his pull too violent. The fabric tore with a loud ripping sound, exposing Lily's bra and stomach to the entire class. The room erupted in gasps and nervous laughter. Lily's face burned with humiliation as she crossed her arms over her chest, trying to cover herself. Hunter stepped back with a look of exaggerated shock. "Oh wow, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "I didn't mean to. Your shirt must have been really old or something." Mrs. Patterson was on her feet immediately, sending Lily to the nurse's office and Hunter to the principal, but the damage was done. Lily's humiliation was complete, witnessed by 30 of her classmates who would undoubtedly spread the story throughout the school by lunch. As Lily sat in the nurse's office wearing a borrowed Roosevelt High sweatshirt, something inside her finally snapped. The careful control she'd maintained for months crumbled, replaced by a cold, calculating anger that felt strangely familiar. She thought about her grandfather's words. "There's a difference between starting a fight and finishing one, little warrior. Sometimes the world forces your hand." That afternoon, Lily went home and retrieved her training gear from the back of her closet. She changed into her old workout clothes and spent 2 hours in the garage, working through every form, every technique, every combination her grandfather had taught her. Her body moved with lethal precision, muscle memory taking over as she prepared for what she knew was coming. She was done being invisible. She was done being a victim. And Hunter Reed was about to learn that the quiet girl he'd been tormenting wasn't as helpless as she appeared. That night, Lily lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. For months, she had tried to be the person her mother wanted her to be, peaceful, normal, invisible. But the humiliation she'd suffered that day had stripped away all pretense. She couldn't continue to let Hunter and his friends terrorize her. More importantly, she realized she didn't want to. She thought about her grandfather's final lesson before he died. Just 6 months before they moved to Ohio, they had been practicing in his garage, as they had every day for 8 years, when he sat her down with a serious expression. "Lily, you're nearly a woman now, and soon you'll be on your own in the world," he had said. "Everything I've taught you, the discipline, the techniques, the control, it's all been preparation for a moment that may never come. But if it does come, if someone pushes you to a place where you have no choice but to fight back, I want you to remember this. You fight to end the fight. You don't fight to hurt people. You fight to protect yourself and others. Do you understand?" Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. At the time, Lily had nodded, not fully grasping the weight of his words. Now lying in her bed with the memory of Hunter's hands on her shirt fresh in her mind, she understood perfectly. The next morning, she made her decision. She would give Hunter and his friends one last chance to back down. If they didn't take it, she would show them exactly who they had been messing with for the past 2 months. She dressed carefully that morning, choosing clothes that wouldn't restrict her movement. She braided her hair back tightly and slipped on her grandfather's dog tags, which she'd worn hidden under her shirts every day since his death. Today, she let them show. At school, she moved through the hallways with a different energy. Her head was up, her shoulders back, her stride confident. Several people noticed the change. Zoe Hernandez, a girl from her art class who had always been kind to her, actually smiled and waved. Mrs. Evans caught her eye in the hallway and nodded approvingly. During lunch, Lily sat at her usual table. But instead of hunching over a book, she sat up straight and surveyed the cafeteria. She was waiting. She didn't have to wait long. Hunter, Jackson, and Megan approached her table right on schedule, their usual predatory grins in place. "Well, well," Hunter said, sliding into the seat across from her. "Look who's sitting up straight today. Did yesterday's little wardrobe malfunction teach you some manners?" Lily looked him straight in the eye, her voice calm and steady. "I'm going to give you one chance to apologize and walk away. After that, things are going to change." The three bullies exchanged glances and burst into laughter. Jackson was nearly crying with mirth. "Oh my God, she's threatening us," he wheezed. "The little church mouse is trying to roar." "This is rich," Megan added. "What are you going to do, Lily? Tell the teacher? Call your mommy?" Hunter leaned forward, his face inches from hers. "Here's what's going to happen, California. You're going to shut up, keep your head down, and maybe we'll get bored and move on to someone else. But this tough girl act? It's not going to work." Lily stood up slowly, her movements fluid and controlled. Every eye in the cafeteria was on them now, sensing that something significant was about to happen. "Okay," she said simply. "I tried." What happened next would become legend at Roosevelt High School, whispered about in hallways and recounted in yearbook stories for years to come. But in that moment, as Lily Brooks prepared to show Hunter Reed and his friends exactly what 8 years of training with a Marine had taught her, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Peace. The quiet girl was about to become very loud. The cafeteria had gone completely silent, 200 students sensing that something monumental was about to happen. Hunter Reed stood up as well, his 6-foot frame towering over Lily's petite figure, his confidence radiating from every pore. "You know what, California?" he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I think it's time we taught you exactly where you stand in this school." He reached out to grab her arm, the same casual dominance he'd shown dozens of times before. But this time, Lily was ready. What happened next defied everything the students at Roosevelt High thought they knew about physics, about power, about the quiet girl who sat alone at lunch. Hunter's hand never reached Lily's arm. Instead, she moved with liquid precision, her grandfather's training taking over as she deflected his grab, stepped inside his reach, and drove her elbow into his solar plexus with surgical accuracy. Hunter doubled over, gasping for breath he couldn't find. The cafeteria erupted in shocked whispers, but Lily wasn't finished. Jackson, seeing his leader in trouble, rushed forward with a wild swing. Lily ducked under his punch effortlessly, swept his legs, and sent him crashing to the floor with a throw. That would have made her grandfather proud. He hit the ground hard, his head spinning as he tried to understand how the quiet girl had just put him flat on his back. Megan, panic in her eyes, grabbed a plastic lunch tray and swung it at Lily's head. Lily caught her wrist mid-swing, applied pressure to a specific point that made Megan cry out, and dropped the tray, then spun her around and gently but firmly pushed her into an empty chair. The entire sequence lasted less than 15 seconds. 3 bullies who had terrorized students for years were now neutralized by a girl who weighed less than any of them. Hunter was still struggling to breathe, his face red with exertion and humiliation. Lily stood over him, her voice calm and steady as she spoke. "I gave you a chance to apologize," she said, loud enough for the entire cafeteria to hear. "I tried to handle this peacefully. But you couldn't leave it alone, could you?" She knelt down so she was at his eye level, her voice dropping to a whisper that only he could hear. "My grandfather was a Marine for 26 years. He taught me that bullies are just cowards who have never been challenged. Thank you for proving him right." Standing back up, she addressed the entire cafeteria. "For 2 months, these 3 have been making my life hell. They've harassed me, humiliated me, and yesterday Hunter thought it would be funny to rip my shirt in front of everyone. I tried to ignore it. I tried to be the bigger person. But sometimes, when someone won't stop hurting you, you have to show them that you're not as helpless as they think." She looked down at Hunter, who was finally getting his breath back. I want you to understand something. I could have hurt you badly just now. I could have broken bones, damaged joints, put you in the hospital, but that's not who I am. I'm not a bully. I'm just someone who refuses to be bullied. The cafeteria remained silent as Lily gathered her things and walked toward the exit. As she passed Zoe Hernandez's table, the girl looked up at her with something that might have been admiration. Holy shit, Lily, Zoe whispered. Where did you learn to do that? Lily paused, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. My grandfather always said that the best way to end a fight is to make sure it never has to happen again. As she left the cafeteria, she could hear the explosion of conversation behind her. She knew this moment would define the rest of her time at Roosevelt High. The question was whether she'd made things better or worse for herself. By the end of the day, the story had spread through Roosevelt High like wildfire, growing and changing. With each telling, some versions had Lily throwing Hunter across the cafeteria like a rag doll. Others claimed she'd used some kind of ancient ninja technique to make Jackson unconscious with a single touch. The truth was impressive enough, but high school students had never been known for their restraint when it came to storytelling. Principal Morrison called Lily into his office during 7th period. She sat across from his desk, her hands folded. In her lap, waiting for the inevitable suspension or expulsion. Miss Brooks, he said, studying her with curious eyes. I've heard some very interesting reports about what happened in the cafeteria today. Yes, sir, Lily replied simply. Hunter Reed is claiming that you attacked him without provocation. He says you used some kind of martial arts on him and his friends. Lily nodded. I defended myself when he tried to grab me. I used the minimum force necessary to stop him. Principal Morrison leaned back in his chair. I've spoken to several witnesses. The story I'm getting is that Hunter and his friends have been harassing you for weeks, and that today they cornered you in the cafeteria. Is that accurate? Yes, sir. And you've never reported this harassment to any school officials? Lily shook her head. I was hoping it would stop on its own. I didn't want to cause trouble. The principal was quiet for a long moment, then opened a file on his desk. Miss Brooks, I'm going to be honest with you. Hunter Reed has been a problem at this school for years. We've had numerous complaints about his behavior, but somehow he always manages to avoid serious consequences. His family has influence in this town. He looked up at her. But what you did today, while understandable, cannot be tolerated. I have to suspend you for fighting on school grounds. Lily felt her heart sink. How long? 3 days, he said. But off the record? I'm glad someone finally stood up to him. Maybe this will be the wake-up call he needs. As Lily gathered her things to leave, Principal Morrison called after her. Miss Brooks, where did you learn to fight like that? My grandfather, she said simply. He taught me that strength without discipline is just violence. I hope I made him proud. The next 3 days passed in a blur of conflicting emotions. Lily's mother was simultaneously proud and worried, unsure whether to scold her daughter for fighting or congratulate her for standing up for herself. The local news even picked up the story, though they kept Lily's name out of it since she was a minor. When she returned to school the following Monday, she found a very different Roosevelt High waiting for her. Students who had never given her a second glance now nodded respectfully as she passed in the hallways. A few even stopped her to thank her for standing up to Hunter and his friends. But the biggest change was in Hunter himself. The cocky swagger was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like shame. He avoided eye contact with everyone, ate lunch alone, and seemed to shrink into himself whenever Lily was around. Jackson and Megan were equally transformed. Jackson's nervous energy had become genuine anxiety, and Megan's mean-spirited confidence had evaporated entirely. The 3 former bullies moved through the school like ghosts, Their reign of terror ended by a quiet girl who had finally decided to speak up. 2 weeks after the cafeteria incident, Lily was surprised to find Hunter waiting by her locker after school. He looked nervous, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, his usual bravado nowhere to be seen. "Lily," he said quietly as she approached, "can I talk to you for a minute?" She studied his face, looking for signs of deception or anger, but found only genuine remorse. "What do you want, Hunter?" "I want to apologize," he said, the words coming out in a rush, "for everything. The harassment, the humiliation, ripping your shirt. All of it. I was an asshole, and I'm sorry." Lily was quiet for a long moment, processing his words. "Why now? Why are you apologizing after all this time?" Hunter ran a hand through his hair, looking uncomfortable. "Because I've been thinking about what you said in the cafeteria, about bullies being cowards who have never been challenged. You were right. I was a coward. I picked on you because I thought you were weak, because it made me feel strong." He looked up at her, his eyes serious. "But you're not weak at all, are you? You're probably the strongest person in this school. You could have really hurt me that day, but you didn't. You could have humiliated me the way I humiliated you, but you didn't. That takes real strength." Lily felt something unexpected flicker of respect for the boy who had made her life hell. "What changed your mind?" "My little sister," Hunter said quietly. "She's in 8th grade, and last week she came home crying because some older kids were picking on her. When I saw her like that, I realized ... that's what I've been doing to you. That's what I've been doing to a lot of people." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "I wrote down the names of everyone I can remember bullying over the years. I'm going to apologize to all of them. I know it won't fix what I did, but maybe it's a start." Lily took the paper and unfolded it. There were dozens of names, some going back to middle school. She recognized several of them, quiet kids who had transferred schools, others who had become even more withdrawn after their encounters with Hunter. "This is a lot of people," she said softly. "I know," Hunter replied. "And I know some of them probably won't forgive me. But I have to try. You showed me that being strong doesn't mean making other people feel weak. It means protecting people who can't protect themselves." The next day, Hunter made good on his promise. He sought out every person on his list, offering genuine apologies and asking what he could do to make amends. Some refused to talk to him. Others told him it was too little, too late. But a few, like Marcus Thompson, a quiet kid from Hunter's chemistry class, accepted his apology and even agreed to let Hunter help him with his homework. Jackson and Megan followed Hunter's lead, reaching out to their own victims and trying to make things right. The change in school culture was gradual but noticeable. Students who had been afraid to speak up began finding their voices. The hallways felt less tense, less dangerous. Mrs. Evans pulled Lily aside after art class one afternoon. "I don't know what you did to those boys," she said with a smile. "But whatever it was, thank you. This school feels like a different place." As the weeks passed, Lily found herself navigating a strange new reality. She was no longer invisible. Students knew her name. Teachers treated her with respect, and she had even been invited to join several clubs and activities. But she was also careful not to let her newfound confidence turn into arrogance. She joined the art club, where her paintings began to reflect a different emotional landscape. Gone were the dark, angry storm clouds of her earlier work. Her new pieces showed quiet strength, a mountain standing firm against the wind, a tree bending but not breaking in a storm, a lighthouse guiding ships safely to shore. More surprisingly, she also convinced Principal Morrison to let her start a self-defense club. Word spread quickly, and within a week she had 20 students signed up, including several who had been bullied in the past. "The goal isn't to turn you into fighters," she explained to the group during their first meeting. "It's to give you confidence. When you know you can defend yourself, You carry yourself differently. Bullies can sense that confidence, and they'll look for easier targets. She taught them basic techniques, how to escape from grabs, how to use an attacker's momentum against them, how to create distance and get to safety. But more importantly, she taught them her grandfather's philosophy. Violence should always be the last resort, she said, echoing his words. The best fight is the one you never have to have. But if someone forces you to fight, you fight to end the fight quickly and safely. Zoe Hernandez became one of her most dedicated students and gradually a close friend. They would spend hours after school practicing techniques and talking about life, art, and their plans for the future. I can't believe you kept this hidden for so long, Zoe said one afternoon as they worked on escape techniques. You could have ended all that bullying on day one. I could have, Lily agreed, but I wanted to try another way first. Violence should never be your first choice. It should be your last choice when all other options have been exhausted. The change in Hunter continued to surprise everyone. He became genuinely helpful around school, standing up for younger students who were being picked on, using his size and former reputation to protect rather than intimidate. He even asked Lily if he could join the self-defense club. I want to learn the right way to be strong, he said simply. Lily considered his request for a long moment. This isn't about learning to fight, Hunter. It's about learning to protect yourself and others. Are you sure that's what you want? I'm sure, he replied. I spent 4 years being the wrong kind of strong. I want to try being the right kind. Graduation day arrived with the kind of perfect spring weather that made small Ohio towns look like postcards. Lily stood in her cap and gown, looking out at the assembled crowd of families and friends, marveling at how much had changed since she'd first walked through Roosevelt High's doors. She had been selected as one of the student speakers, an honor that would have been unthinkable 8 months ago when she was just the quiet girl trying to remain invisible. As she stepped up to the podium, she saw familiar faces in the crowd, her mother, beaming with pride, Mrs. Evans nodding encouragingly, Zoe giving her a thumbs up, and even Hunter, Jackson, and Megan, who had become unlikely allies in her mission to change the school's culture. When I first came to Roosevelt High, she began, her voice carrying clearly across the assembled crowd, I thought the best way to survive was to make myself invisible. I thought that if I kept my head down, avoided attention, and never caused trouble, I could make it through 4 years without any problems. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. I was wrong. Sometimes, the very act of trying to be invisible makes you a target. Sometimes, the people who most need to find their voice are the ones who are most afraid to speak up. She told them about her grandfather's lessons, about the difference between strength and violence, about the importance of standing up for yourself and others. She didn't mention the cafeteria incident specifically, but everyone knew what she was talking about. I learned that true strength isn't about being able to hurt people, she said. It's about being able to protect them. It's about using your power to lift others up, not to tear them down. It's about having the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it's scary. As she concluded her speech and returned to her seat, she felt a deep sense of peace. She had found her voice, found her place in the world, and most importantly, found a way to honor her grandfather's memory while still being true to herself. After the ceremony, as families took pictures and students said their goodbyes, Hunter approached her one last time. Thank you, he said simply, for showing me who I could be instead of who I was. Thank you for being willing to change, Lily replied. Not everyone has that courage. As she walked across the parking lot with her mother and Zoe, heading toward a future that suddenly seemed bright with possibility, Lily thought about the journey that had brought her here. She had started as a girl trying to hide from the world, and she was ending as a young woman ready to engage with it. Her phone buzzed with a text from her uncle in Los Angeles. who had been keeping track of her progress. "Heard about your graduation speech," it read. "Your grandfather would be proud. You found your own way to be a warrior." Lily smiled, fingering the dog tag she still wore around her neck. She had found her own way indeed, not through violence or intimidation, but through the quiet strength that came from knowing exactly who she was and refusing to let anyone else define her. The quiet girl had found her voice, and the world was about to find out just how powerful that voice could be. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.